Really, it's unfortunate that there are some parallels, yes, and similarities. And this should not happen if we had a true federation. Because everyone understands who has rights over what and who doesn't have rights over what, you know. But we have a very confused situation, and that arises from the type of constitution we have in Nigeria today. But I don't want to go so far as to call it a face-off. If you remember, it's not so long ago that the Western states came together and formed a Motikun. There was a difference of opinion between the Western state governors and the center. I think somebody came over and said it is illegal, it can't happen, but it has happened. Because when the need comes, the need must be satisfied. And this is the situation that I see. So maybe sometimes people either just make these statements for the sake of making the statements, or perhaps they mean it, but then they realize that they were wrong and they back down. And what has to happen, happens. So in the end, I think what the Southern governor said will have to prevail, because I believe it's the correct thing.
All right, I was just actually going to ask you that your thoughts about the Asaba Accord of the Southern governors, put that vis-a-vis the recent statements by the spokesperson for the president, Garba Shehu, who's just basically come out to rubbish the Asaba Accord.
No, it's very difficult for anybody to try to rubbish the Asaba Accord, because a consensus is a consensus, and it's not just... See, I don't want to regionalize this thing. That it started in Asaba doesn't mean that it is a sectional issue. It is a national issue, and somebody has to voice it, somebody has to suggest a solution to it, and just because it comes from a particular section doesn't mean that it is regional or sectional. Before the Asaba Accord, and I'm saying well before the Asaba Accord, we had Governor Gundije come up with a solution, and he's a northern governor, and his solution was accepted by Mighty Allah. And McBan recently has adopted even the position of the southern governors, that really trekking animals across the country is no longer feasible. No, doesn't make sense anymore. Those children ought to be in school. They ought to have proper medical attention. Nomadic education has failed. So what else? You have to put them where those facilities and they need can be provided, and that means you have to ranch. And they have come out with the statement, I didn't know this, that's about 5 million hectares of land in what they call grazing reserves. And they said, before we go to the ranching, let us start with that. And I think that's a perfect solution. And that came from the north, came from Mayatiela. So please, let nobody make these things sound as though it is the southern governors that want it. It is the country that needs it. The country, we have to look at want and need separately. The country absolutely needs it. We have to stop this taking of animals from one part of the country, whether it is even north part to other northern part, or northern part to southern part. It has to end, because the time for it is long past. There's other ways of transporting animals, and they're available to us. So why don't we use those?
But what are your concerns on this issue? The Benue State Governor was the first, in his state to ban open grazing. 17 southern governors have also come out. Yes, you are absolutely right that it is a national problem. But the concern now is, if the president doesn't, support or stamp this decision by the southern governors, how do we begin to look for solutions, not forgetting that the activities of these marauding headers continues to end up with lives of Nigerians being lost at almost every state?
The president is an elected person. He's elected by the people. His obligation is to do what is good for the people. Let's start from there. So even if at the beginning, let me repeat what I said not so long ago. When Amatekun was formed, this presidency, somebody has to define this presidency for me to fully understand, to be honest. Presidency came and said, oh no, it's not proper, it's not legal, it's not constitutional, and so on. But Amatekun is acting, it's functioning. So even if there is this initial anti-position, it will give That will give. And as I said, what the people need, which is really to stop this trekking about wall, will prevail. Now, I, as an architect and planner, made a statement not so long ago that the conflict comes because two groups are asking for the same thing and insisting they must have it. I gave even Abuja as an example. How old is Abuja? Today we can hardly find room to put buildings. But not so long ago, Abuja was open grazing land. It's not a very old city. It's one of the newest towns in Nigeria. In fact, one of the new towns Nigeria has got. So open grazing land is no longer available. I think the military have a saying that when the land changes, formation must change. we have to even go to accept that kind of a dictum. But what it is that modern things come with modernity. We are using wireless system, we are using internet, we're using nobody insists that we must go back and string lines across for us to make telephone calls. So you change when the need comes for you to change. That need has come. And the people that want to bring this rights issue, everybody has a right to settle the way they want. Nobody's asking anybody not to settle the way they want, but I was taught that every individual right has social obligations and therefore limitations. Just because there's a road and they say you have a car, you can use the road, does not suggest that you should go and do double parking so nobody else can pass, or you should drive your car and park it in front of my gate so I can't enter my house. You have obligations. And cattle rearing has its own limitation. The merchants, they have the right to go in to breed their cattle wherever. Yes, governors also have the right to issue certificates of occupancy, or even the local governments, they issue right of occupancy over rural land. Until you apply for and get that land, it's not yours. You have no right to trespass onto anybody else's land. Nobody can show me that any part of the Constitution of Nigeria allows you to trespass onto somebody's land. It does not exist. So we have to think, even if you want to go constitutional and legal and so on, those are my considerations. You do not, I'm sorry, I'm bringing in the Attorney General now because of a statement he made about Igbo traders and motor parts traders. I don't know any Igbo motor parts trader that goes and invests somebody's property to sell motor parts. He goes and legitimately hires a shop and puts his wares there. And if the owner, in fact, comes and says, I've got a better rent than you are paying, he drives him out and he has to go. That is being law-abiding. The walking cattle through somebody else's land, somebody else's property today is not legal, it is not proper, and trespassing, and trespass is against the law. Even from that legal point of view, it should stop.
Do you find the problem of enforcement likely going to come into play here, Chief? A problem of enforcement of these decisions taken by the southern governments? Why I ask that question, Chief, is, one, the federal government controls the instrument of state power, the police, the army. Now, if the states decide, the southern governors have decided, we are going to ban open grazing, and the state houses of assembly in these states enact appropriate laws to back, for those who haven't the laws yet, to back these up. How do they implement those laws? How do they enforce those laws when the police, the institution of state power, is directly under the control of the executive, headed by a president who has now said, look, what you're doing is rubbish?
I want to believe that by the time a House of Assembly enacts a law, it will, within the law, provide the means for enforcement. Believe me, that means will come. And it would be good if the federal government did not go head-on against whatever is decided, because it is the Constitution that gives the governors the right to say, this land belongs to you, you can occupy it, and this land does not belong to you, and you cannot trespass on it. That is in the Constitution. So I want to pray and hope that the federal government will not bring about a situation in which there is an open clash.
So that takes us to the issue of federalism, the kind of federalism you're operating in the country. You've been speaking very, very vociferously about the need to ensure that we restructure the country, that the country practices the federal principles that it aspires or professes to be. How can a true federal structure help solve this crisis of cattle, moving cattle from one place to the other?
If we had a federal system, it would be obvious to everybody that all the governments are coordinate, not subordinate. We have a situation today where the governors are allowed to operate as dictators and the president as a garrison commander. That should not happen in a federal system. In a federal system, nobody should be subordinate one to the other. But we are today, and that is what part of the problem is. So until we restructure to the point where we recognize the true principles of federalism and practice them, we have not been practicing principles of federalism. We can't have been. If we were, the federal government will not be controlling my resources. Federal government will not. Look, how many times does a governor come to Abuja? Supposed to govern from your state, but they have to be here to govern their states. Look at, in my time, look at the way even a governor like Dereye or God rest his soul in peace, Alamese were removed from office. A few legislators from their states were brought to Abuja to hold a meeting and say we impeach the governor, and he goes. You know, it cannot happen in a federal system. So this thing did not start today. It's just reaching a crescendo now. And you are giving me credit for speaking for federalism. It is now universal. When I say universal, it's not only just national, but even outside the shores of this country, people are saying Nigeria ought to practice federalism to be able to survive and move forward. That has been established by so many. It's the voices calling for it now. It's all over the country, and I see even outside the country. People that have been our development partners for a long time are advising us along those lines. So we really have to just accept the fact that federalism or the consequences can be very dire.
Your Excellency, restructuring as being, you know, in our lips for the longest of times, and people are saying that, a lot of people are saying that to actually, you know, achieve restructuring, we have to start from constitution amendment. While on the other hand, you have people who have also said that we need a new constitution altogether. Where do you stand?
I want to quote, or I may not be exact in the words, but I want to quote a man that was the MBA president, the Bar Association, in I think 2003. He said that mere amendments may not satisfy the needs of the people. When a thing is so bad that you have to amend all of it, it becomes a new thing. So I stand with those who say that what we need is not amendment, but a new constitution. We have to have a new constitution. The present constitution that we have is so wrong in so many ways, in so many aspects, that it will be impossible to amend it without just... if by the time you have a document and you amend every clause of it, have you not established a new document? You have. Basically, that's what almost every clause of this constitution has to be amended to give us true federalism. And we had it. That's what we started with. And the beauty about the federal system is that that is what all the peoples of Nigeria debated and finally agreed to. Enahoro moved the motion for independence in 1953. He wanted it in 56. We couldn't achieve it in 56. We continued to negotiate until 1960. 7 years of intense negotiation, not only here but also in London, those London conferences, to arrive at what everybody in Nigeria would like to have. The military came, and it's because the military only understands single line order, unitary system. They introduced it. But having gone, that system should have gone with the military. But we kept it. And that's where we have faltered. We have to go back and establish the type of constitution that we had in 1960 if we want to make progress and even if we want to survive. Because what's happening today is not healthy rivalry, but a fight to finish among the federating units. In a federal system, you find that every federating unit develops what it has as its resources, or even invests in resources that somebody else has and develops itself and grows at its own pace. Because in a federal system, opportunities are equal, but means are not necessarily equal. So you have to accept that you live by your means, somebody else lives by his means, and there's no jealousy. There was none. In those days, the Western region was paying 5 shillings. The East was paying 3. The North was paying 2. Who quarreled? Because that's what they could afford. Yeah. And everybody is satisfied. The West started free education. Who said it must be universal? If you couldn't afford free education for at every level, you were content with what you could do. So there'll be contentment because people were living within their means. A federal system is so very superior, and our founding fathers saw it, agreed to. Don't forget that during those debates, a unitary system was suggested. Some people said no. They argued about it and came to the conclusion that that would not be right. People called confederation. People argued about it and said no, that would not be right. Eventually, we agreed to a federal system, and I must add, also a parliamentary system. Because a lot of what's happening here today is also the nature of the presidential system that we run, which produces dictators, as I have said. Vassals. Federal government makes everything. People stand up and say, oh, there are 3 tiers of government. There's only 1 tier of government. Federal government and vassals of federal government. That's why you can stay here and say, if the state says this, how will they enforce it? Federal government will go and do something different. It cannot happen in a federation. Not so long ago, President Trump gave a presidential order. Before the words could finish coming out of his mind, the governor said, no, that will not happen in my state because the circumstances in my state are different. And he gave reasons. Tell me that that can happen in Nigeria. But that is the true presidential system as they run it. But we went and copied it and turned it into something that you can't even recognize as a presidential system. This is pure dictatorial government. That's what it is. So it's not even a unitary system. How can you don't have the means to even disagree with, not to mention fight the federal government. Yes. So we need to go back and establish those principles and the system that our forefathers left us if we want to have any hope of making progress and giving the country a rebirth. So I have even moved from restructuring to rebirth. We want a new birth for this country. This country has to have a new life, you know.
Obong Attah, it's interesting that you mentioned, you know, the 1953 motion for independence and the engagement that existed between the different, you know, sections of Nigeria, the regions, and even the ethnic nationalities at the time, various meetings they had. And the fact that the regions were even much stronger. Because I remember Ahmadu Bello was the premier in the northern region. But he wasn't interested in being the head of government at the center. Tafawa Balewa had to be the head of center, and just clearly his nomination. It tells you how strong the regions are, and if the regions are strong, then you ensure that the national is already solid as well. But there's so many years that has passed since that time up to now. We've run more or less a unitary kind of system, structure of government for a long time. Even the disguise we have as a federal institution now, federal system now, is more or less, you know, carrying a lot of relics. It is actually relics of the unitary system. You tried something in the 2000s while you were governor to engage with some of these very thorny aspects of the unitary system when you debated resource control. And that had a lot of pushback. There was a lot of resistance. That the best we've been able to have now is just 13%. Do you think it would be possible to reverse the wheel and go back to where we were pre-1960 and have perhaps the kind of constitution that was available in 1960 enforceable and implementable at this time, after so many years practicing what we've been practicing for this long?
We have remained, let me take it from a Christian point of view. If you are living in sin, you get to the point that I've been living in sin for so long, well, let me continue and go to hell. There comes a point when you must realize that you are living in sin. So you repent and go back to the right thing, if I can use that as an analogy. This was imposed by the military. And as I say, it is the biggest surprise to me that when the military left, we didn't jettison this unitary system. So the fact that we've been practicing the wrong thing longer than we practiced the right thing. We had practiced the right thing from 1960 to 66, or whenever the war came. We had practiced it. But the unitary system came in with the military, and just because we have been practicing it for so long does not suggest that we must continue. No, it means we can repent of our sins today and go back to what we know is the proper thing to do, which is to have this federal system.
But still flowing by your analogy, when the mind has been stiffened by sin, and when the structure has become so rigid, how do you break it?
He goes to hell. Otherwise, he breaks it. Finish. So would you rather Nigeria went to hell? I would rather Nigeria broke it and went back to doing the right thing.
You know why I asked that? Because I still remember how, I mean, during your time as governor, when you were fighting resource control battle, you had very few support. Late Governor Bayelsa was one of those who was beside you, pushing the narrative.
And Governor Ibori too.
And Governor Ibori as well. But there was a lot of resistance. Incidentally, at the time, you didn't have a northern president. You had a southern president who a lot of people would have expected would have shared your sentiment and your point of view. But he saw it differently.
He was a soldier. Please, I'm sorry to interrupt you. He was a soldier. And who is talking about more about resource control and federalism today than the same man who fought it? So he has repented. He has seen that it was wrong. So he's come back. He didn't consist to say, no, I had opposed this thing, therefore I must continue to oppose it. So sometimes the light dawns on us sooner on others than it does on others. You know what I mean? So if the light has dawned on all of us now, and believe me, this thing I'm talking is not coming from any one section of the country anymore. As I said, all over the country, everybody, let me not name names, but somebody very much, quite a lot of Northerners say, even this restructuring that we are saying can be done even before 2023. For the next, they are saying so. And they want it. And from everywhere, everybody wants it. So it is no longer a matter of Victor Attah and one or two other supporters fighting for this thing. It is the country suddenly waking up to the fact that maybe Victor Attah was talking sense. So let us do it.
Your Excellency, Utibe has referred so much to, the resistance to resource control, even way beyond when you were governor. Then my question that I want to ask is, why has this country held on to this contentious constitution for this long? You have also repeated that when the military left, it should have been thrown away. So the question to ask will be, who gains from this faulty constitution? Well,
you see, by the time you begin to talk about who gains, people get offended because you are now going to say, oh, this section is benefiting, that's why that section is benefiting. That I don't want to get into that. What it is that we adopted a wrong system. Yes, it benefited some people thought it was, but even they are realizing that no, even what we thought was a benefit is not a benefit. Because today, there's no state that would not be a lot more affluent than they are if they had been able to exploit their resources. Look, let me just give you one or two simple examples. The governor of Kaduna State came and said, there is more gold in Kaduna than in all of South Africa. if Kaduna State had been exploiting that gold, what do you think would have happened? Somebody said the tar sands in Ondo has more oil than even the one we are drilling in the south. If we had exploited those tar sands and brought out the oil, at the time, oil price was high. Very soon, it'll be useless because the oil prices are going down, you know. And as we begin to move away from these fossil fuels, to renewable energy, that thing will become useless. No, America could not drill shale oil because the cost of bringing up shale oil was so high. But when the prices went up, they drilled, they brought up. Now the price gone down, they've stopped. Bring up shale oil. It's there in the ground. Nobody's drilling because you can't sell it at today's price. So the cost of bringing it up, and it will get to the point where it will even get so bad that nobody will be looking at oil again. So all those other things that we were keeping, they become meaningless to us. So so the point I'm making is, if the states had been allowed to control their resources and develop, look, now, people, I don't carry those figures in my head, but people are saying that the amount of arable land in Nigeria is mind-boggling. If we had developed agriculture, but we just allowed everything. Today we are trying to do rice. Today we are trying to do wheat. But it could have come naturally. Look at how many textile mills closed down in Kaduna. Arewa Tex, Nortex, all these, Norspin, all of them based on cotton. We abandoned it because we thought it was beneficial to share money from oil. They are now seeing, everybody is now seeing that we were all wrong. We were all wrong to have abandoned our enterprise, our industry. We are very industrious people. We work hard. We do. Look, put an average Nigerian beside anybody else in the. Believe me, the Nigerian will beat him. You know, in almost any and every enterprise. But we abandoned it because it was sufficient to sit down and say, feed me with oil money. Oil money cannot feed us again.
Yep.
So,
Your Excellency, you have, let me infer again to the reference you made before. When the people have seen the light,
yes,
you know, the right thing that you expect that they do is that they'll turn from their, you know, bad ways and turn towards good. Are you optimistic? You've also just, you know, given us an analogy, talked about how industrious we are, the kind of people that we are, what we could have achieved if we had maintained those industries. Are you optimistic with the kind of the crop of leaders that we have today? Are they ready? Do you see these leaders ready to make that turn around and turn towards light away from darkness?
What are they leading? People. They were voted in by people. People can make them turn around. People will insist that they turn around. People will insist that they cannot continue like this. So the leaders will either become true leaders of the people by doing the will of the people, or they'll fall by the wayside. I think some of them are beginning to be aware of that. The people elected them, and if the people that elected them now say, this is what we want, that is what we will have. And that's why but this constitution as we have it today does not provide the means for the people to exert their will sufficiently. Look at all the, tell me if there's any state, I may be wrong, but I don't know of any state where a governor is from one party and even a councillor is from a different party. They try and manipulate it so that everything falls in their pocket. That's why I say what we have are not government. We are vassals of the federal government. And that's where everybody runs the center, the Abuja, instead of staying and governing in their state, they run to Abuja for everything. That should not be in a federal system. Federal should even be copying from you. Today we have attorney. We used to have attorney general and as well as minister for justice. Two separate things. Today we have only one accountant general. We used to have accountant general of the federation and accountant general of the federal government. In fact, the federal government needed that accountant general because that accountant general is the one that made sure that the states didn't cheat the federal. Because you were supposed to pay a percentage of what you make to the center. And that attorney, accountant general was the one that made sure that the federating unit didn't cheat the federal, that they paid the actual amount that they should pay. But today we put it in one. All those things have to give, unless we don't want to make progress.
All right, still saying on how those things should give. You talked about the leaders who are being elected by the people should put the pressure on them to do the right thing, right? Do you even see these leaders feeling a sense that they were elected by the people? I mean, with the structure of
no,
elections
they don't.
and how they come into office?
That's the sad thing. They don't, because of the way they got into office, but very soon it will dawn on them that they are, in fact, representatives of the people. And that's why I really thank the southern governors for what they did. I don't want to say they took too long, because everything comes in its own right time. They woke up and realized that they are elected to govern a people, and they must govern the people the way the people want to be governed. And so they came out with these pronouncements. And what upsets me, people now trying to make it sound regional, because simply because it came from, but it's not even they who started it. You know, it started from somewhere else. So when a leader looks back and doesn't see any following, he will know that he's not leading. And that will happen to a lot of the people you call leaders today.
But some of the persons have also cited the need for an elite consensus of sort between the different regions in the country and ethnic nationalities. The North, the South, the Middle Belt. Do you think that is even possible? Why I'm asking that question, Your Excellencies, I take you back to the 2014 National Conference, which was the last time leaders from all different parts of the country came together to sit down to discuss. And discussing issue of resource control, derivation principle, and fiscal federalism was, as always, very thorny, very divisive, and very controversial. At the end of the day, you really didn't get the kind of semblance that there's some absolute consensus on the issues. Let me read to you one of the recommendations at that conference, as it has to do with resource control, derivation principle, and fiscal federalism. The conference noted that assigning percentage for the increase in derivation principle and setting up special intervention funds to address issues of reconstruction and rehabilitation of areas ravaged by insurgency and internal conflicts, as well as solid minerals development, require some technical details and consideration. The conference therefore recommended that government should set up a technical committee to determine the appropriate percentage on the three issues and advise government accordingly.
I hated that committee.
Thank you very much. And that is why I'm throwing it at you again.
It was the best we could achieve at the time, and believe me, that is a necessary first step. That's a recognition of the fact that something is wrong with what we are doing now, and we want to change it. And we were trying to specify the method by which the steps we could take to make sure those things are corrected. There was a major breakthrough that at least the conference recognized. You said divisive, perhaps, but I will also remind you that that is one conference where every decision was taken by unanimous decision. We didn't vote. We didn't vote on any resolution. Everything was unanimously agreed to. So that is the position of Nigerians. That it has not been implemented is perhaps...
Do you think this can actually solve the current existential challenges we're having?
It is a first step. It is a first step. Just as 13% was a very minor first step. But this is an additional step, if you like, you know, on the path to solving our problem. But the way to truly solve this problem is just to take the bull by the horn and say, look, enough is enough is enough.
But we never had that technical committee which you recommended.
We didn't, that's what I'm saying. So the thing to do now is to say enough is enough. We must solve this matter. And the way we want to solve this matter is to say that there has to be a way we write a new constitution so that there'll be the constitution of the people, by the people, for the people. At the moment, we don't have that type of constitution.
So for you, again, first
not
step,
just for me, for those who believe in Nigeria surviving.
Okay, so this first step, how, in your own opinion, after all the work that you and your colleagues did in 2014, how do you think that this can be, you know, implemented or achieved at this moment, this first step you're talking about?
I will tell you, the unfortunate thing about that conference, and this is where if people want to run away from something, they'll find a good reason to run away from something. This government came and called, oh, it was Jonathan's conference, and we are not interested. We didn't take the proper steps to have that conference constituted. They should, because the National Assembly raised the issue of sovereignty. There can't be two sovereign. You want a sovereign conference, you want the, and you want, we are holding the sovereignty of the people. So how can there be two sovereignties? There should have been a law passed by the National Assembly to have that conference set up. Then no subsequent government could have come and said it was somebody's conference. It would have been a national, the decisions of which must be enforced. So
Is it too late?
Well, but it has to happen.
But it doesn't at the same time invalidate the content of the report.
It does not invalidate it, but if you cannot implement it, what's the point holding it?
That's a function of political will, isn't it?
That's the political will I'm talking about. See, you talked, let me go back to something you said. Elite consensus. We recognize these things. That in fact, the bigger resistance will come from politicians today, who are the ones really enjoying the... Somebody sent me an analysis of the salaries of senators. Have you received it? Go and look at it. You won't believe what those figures that you see. You see, so it will not even be North resisting South. No, it will be politicians resisting it because they feel all these lavish benefits that they are getting could possibly be taken away from them. But they may be wrong. They may not necessarily be taken away from them. But the general opinion of the people is such that these things must happen, and they will put enough pressure to say, politicians, we elected you into those positions. If you don't agree to do what we want, we will not vote for you.
You're putting a lot of power on the electorate,
yes,
which they do have. I want to, you know, just divert our attention a little bit to the recent happenings across the country, particularly on INEC offices across the country. INEC has come out to say, I mean, there's a deliberate attempt to thwart electioneering process in Nigeria because as of last week, over 20 INEC offices have been touched. What are your concerns about this?
I am very concerned about lawlessness. Nobody should condone lawlessness. But you see, you've introduced a topic that I've also had a lot of thought on and have written a paper on, because there was a committee set up under Senator Ken Namani to look at how to improve elections. And I made a point. And why I want to share this point with you is because when Justice Roosevelt was leaving office, he harped on this. And I was very pleased to hear that the voice of somebody from the bench is also supporting the position. See, this, they say, whoever alleges must prove. So you go and say, elections were not properly conducted in my area. You say, come and prove it. With what materials? Materials that are held by INEC. And my INEC refuses to give you the materials or mutilates it so they cannot be admitted in court. How do you prove it? So the important thing today is to let it be known that by the time INEC announces results, INEC is alleging that it has conducted proper results. So call INEC to come and prove that it conducted proper results. You will see proper elections being conducted. You see all the materials intact, and you use it for whatever purpose. Unless until you put the onus of proof on INEC, you will not get proper elections in this country. Much as I don't accept lawlessness, people are saying, INEC, you don't do proper elections. Well, why pick on INEC?
INEC is a function of a system.
All right.
That's it. So I'm glad you say that. I didn't want to be the one saying. I'm glad you say that because it is the system change that we must have. We must have a system change, and that system change can only be guaranteed by a constitution. So we must have a change in constitution, a new constitution.
Great. Change in constitution just reminds me that among the recommendations you also made was the sharing formula of federal government having 42.5%, I think, and state government having 35%, local government 22% in your 2014 conference. And that will essentially mean that the states, the subnationals, will have a larger share of national revenue, especially now that the state governments are trying to take over the functions and control the federal, local government.
I want to appeal to you. The use of subnational is correct, but let's be careful. In Nigeria, it can be misinterpreted. In a federal system, those governments are coordinates, not subordinates. So no one is not sub to the other. One in a federal system is the government at the federating unit should not be subordinate to the government at the center. It should be coordinated with it, And I can't remember which of you said something about people going to. There was something also that our president said, President Obasanjo, and I want to hope he was correct, that a respected name like Adebo, a super PEMSEC at the federal level, when he retired, went and contested it and won election as a local government chairman. It was you who talked about Sardauna and Tafawa Balewa. Look, the government at the local level is far, far more relevant to the citizen than the government at the center. If we have a federal system, so it will not matter. All the people that are shouting for one president, the president should not matter to anybody. It's just to administer the country, the currency, the citizenship, custom, those type of things, It should not be the one controlling my life and your life. The person controlling it should be the state government and even down to the local government. And that is guaranteed in a federal system. But we don't have it in this unitary system. Because unitary system unifies everything in the person of the president. I made a statement once that in most places, if this, then that. If that, then the other. But in Nigeria, if this, as president. If that, as president. If the other, as president. Why should it be so?